Hello and welcome back to this very special episode of Project MX-5. The reason this is such a special episode is because, Gareth, what's happening? Coilovers! Oh yeah, we're fitting coilovers today, which means Phil is getting more low. You come and have a look at this side, the MCM shoe test. One shoe, two shoes. Let me just borrow your shoe. Lift your leg, thank you. 3 man-sized shoes. So this car at the moment is failing the MCM shoe test in about 4 hours. It's probably going to be more like 7 or 8 hours, isn't it? We won't have any need for shoes anymore. And then all of you people, you can chill out and stop sending me Instagram messages saying, when are you going to lower Phil? Because it's going to be done. Yeah!
Changing your regular suspension to shiny new coilover suspension is a relatively simple process, but does require a fair bit of strength, patience, and way more spanner time than you bargained for. First, start off by removing the wheels, then remove the bolts that attach your crappy old suspension to the wishbone. After that, loosen the top mount bolts, which are accessed under the bonnet and underneath the carpet in the MX-5's boot. With all your bolts safely stored in a container, you should be able to tease the old suspension unit out. Once you've done this, you should be able to take your lovely new suspension, in this case H&R coilovers, and slot them into place. We start the epic suspension swap by getting Moss's very own Phil to unwrap and assemble the coilovers, while Gareth and I get the wheels off and loosen the suspension bolts. After that, the top mount bolts come off, as do the bolts that hold the anti-roll bar, which allows for more play when getting the old struts out.
Yeah, so we need to pull off that shroud there.
This.
So there should be bolts holding in that.
Yeah.
So you might, whoa, bolt and bolt, so 4 of them there.
So because we've got these 2 pipes in the way, it makes it very difficult to access the top of the mount. So we need to use a CV joint. Thank you very much. Chuck it on there. And what that does, it gives you a bit of freedom to kind of have a little bit of a wiggle.
You can see we've unloosened the top mounts because this whole thing is flapping up and down. You can see that all right? And what we need to do to take this whole section out here is to undo this completely. And that holds the bottom of the shock absorber to this wishbone. So that's what we're pulling out now. And then this should theoretically come out as an entire McPherson unit.
In theory.
In theory. There isn't enough wiggle room, so we're gonna have to compress it, or you can just take an angle grinder to it. But I'm gonna go for the first option.
Yeah, angle grinder and
springs.
Spring with tension, that could be bad. So we're gonna use a couple of spring compressors, whack those on, and then get those springs right down.
Spring compressors on, it's time for a race. I'm going old school on this one because, well, I'm an idiot.
The race is we need to compress our springs as quickly as possible.
Indeed.
So turbocharged versus NA. On your marks, get set, go.
Yes! You're just too slow, Alex.
Oh, I don't like the look of that. Yeah, I want to keep the hell away from that. Yeah. Jesus, try to throw it.
Yeah, so you can choose your different drops for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the 2 bad ways of doing it would be to put a blowtorch on it, but that damages the actual material of the spring. Second one is to cut it, which is a really bad idea. And the 2 safer ways are to buy racing springs, put those on, and those will give you a desired drop, so you can choose the different drops to what you want. Or you go the whole hog way, and probably the most expensive way, and that's to use coilovers such as this one here.
And what's the benefit of using coilovers over versus just putting in some racing springs?
Well, coilovers, you can choose your ride height. In order to choose your ride height on a coilover, you would just wind these 2 collets up and down this threaded shaft along the shock body, and that way you have sort of a whole range of different heights that you can set your car to, rather than if you had to just buy racing springs and they would hold that same height for the duration of of the car's life.
So we've just been discussing how low the car's actually going to be, and what Rob, the man in charge, says is that we should wind these coilovers all the way down and then work our way up, really, right? So we can see how slammed the car is to begin with. And over 3 weeks, you reckon the car's going to naturally get lower by what, 3 centimeters? So if I had a 3 centimeter height above the wheel to the arch, then in 3 weeks time it could be completely snug. So the conclusion is we're going to slam it, and then we're going to see, and then we're going to have to raise the rates by probably quite a way. Only time will tell. So at the moment we are trying to get the new H&R coilovers into the strut towers, but it looks like it's going to be a bit of a faff. So
Right. Do you have enough space?
Possibly. I think we're gonna need to wind this in. It's me sad putting spring compressors, because inevitably you will scratch your springs a little bit.
After some cooperation from the spring compressor and a lot of bicep flexing, we get the first coilover into position. Time to tighten it up and find out the torque setting for the Wishbone bolt.
Gareth sent me over the torque settings for everything the other day. It was very good of you, Gareth.
Thank you very much, Alex.
So as you can see, rear and lower shock bolts, 80 Newton meters. And then you wait for the click. Oh yes.
Done.
Repeat the same process for the coilover on the other side.
And that's it.
So we're halfway through of the build of the coilovers. It is now, what time is it? 21:55. We've been working for about 2.5 hours now. We've got the suspension on the rear there, and now it's obviously time for a barbecue. So we've had some games, so we're feeling strong. What time is it?
It is 4 minutes past 11.
4 minutes past 11, so we've been going since 7:30. So that is just under 4 hours. Yep, just under 4 hours. And
we would have started this earlier though if Ethan had turned up on time.
Yeah, if Ethan would have turned up on time. So Ethan tells us to turn up at 4:30. We'll get cracking pretty quickly. What time did you turn up, Ethan? 7:30. Sorry, what? 7:30. So that's 3 hours late, 3 hours. Anyway, we've done the rear of the suspension. We still need to screw in the top mounts through the boot. And now we have taken off this plastic undercarriage. And we're gonna get cracking on the front. So, what do we need to do now? Gareth.
So what we've decided to do is not to take this ball joint out, which is just over here, but instead take this bolt, really long one, out of here. And there's a nut on this end. And you can pull this straight through, which will allow you to take this upper part of the wishbone away from the wheel, and this should sort of easily slip out. There's 2 bolts there, well, 2 nuts there that need undoing, and then this one down here that needs taking out. And this whole assembly should sort of lean forward, and you should be able to rock this and just pop it out the top. But sort of be careful of the paint up here, because you don't want to start chipping that in a massive rush to just yank the whole thing out.
Oh, that's a bad noise.
It's dry.
Oh, it's screaming. Not enjoying it, Gareth. Don't worry, it'll soon be over.
We've left the top mount in place so everything doesn't just collapse on itself. So those screws, those nuts we will take out later. And we're going to take this lower shock nut and bolt out. And that should allow this thing to sag down a little bit. And then we'll sort of lower the car down and then try wiggle this whole assembly out.
We managed to remove the world's longest bolt before we lower the car back down to unscrew the front top mounts that are located under the bonnet.
Right, so the bolts in the top mount have been undone now, and all that's left to do is to unscrew the ABS sensor. Got a 12 spanner here. Give it some penetration and then hope that this bastard comes off easily. Now with a bit of wiggling, this should drop out. Oh, yes. Oh. And then we have some old ass suspension. That's completely perished. Look at that. That has seen better days. Now we put in the coilovers.
The front coilovers go in easier than anticipated, meaning we don't need to attach the spring compressors. Just a heavy right foot on the wishbone and then feed it in. Then we put the longest bolt back in and torque it up.
You said 128 foot-pounds?
No, Newton meters. 128 Newton meters, which
or
is 128
Newton meters?
Yeah, which is 95 foot-pounds.
You keep swapping between metric and...
No, because you said how many Newton meters. 128.
128
Newton meters.
Cool.
And there you have it. The coilover is in and looking awesome. I can't wait to see how much lower Phil's going to be once the job is done. But first, we need to repeat the process on the other side and make sure to reattach the ABS sensor and connecting bolts. Because I've got the attention span of a child, I got a bit bored, so left Gareth to finish up while I found something else to do.
So I thought, why don't we swap out the old cat with a new racing cat? Take these bolts off. Voila. 4 bolts in my back pocket. Oh, yes. Oh, this thing is ancient and horrible. Right. There we have one crappy old cat. So as you can see, the new racing cat has just been installed. It took quite a lot longer than expected because we had to find new bolts for it. But racing cat, done. Now let's continue with the coilovers.
We reattach the anti-roll bar, but then...
Oh, you f***ing just snapped. What? No.
Yeah. So as I was just tightening the bolt for the anti-roll bar, it snapped. So yeah.
My patience is wearing thin, so I leave Phil to drill that out and put a new bolt in. Gareth puts the plastic undercarriage back on and we bring the car back down to tighten up the top mounts, bolt up the metal fuel pipe shroud and finally put the wheels back on. It's now time to see how much lower Phil is finally going to be.
Oh, that's a lot.
That's it.
It's higher than it was before. It's still a 4x4. We have put this pretty low. There's maybe another 1.5 centimeters of thread left, but still failing the MCM shoe test. And as you can see at the rear, I'm failing the MCM shoe test even more than I was when I started. So lots of bemused faces, and we just don't know what's going on. So to find out just how much height the car has dropped over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to measure it now. From the bottom of the arch to the top of the wheel, I make that 12 centimeters. And in 3 weeks' time, we're going to come back with the measuring stick and find out how much the suspension is settled. So on the front, it's 12 centimeters, and on the back, I estimate 14.5. Yeah, 15.5. 15.5 versus 12. Damn.
I feel defeated.
Yeah.
I'm really tired.
We lost. Phil, you're stronger than I thought you were. So 4 weeks have passed since the H&R coilovers were installed. I think it's now time to have a quick measure up. Remember about 4 weeks ago, the front was measuring 12 centimeters. We're now on 10 centimeters, so that is quite a good drop because the suspension has obviously settled. Let's have a look at the rear. So from 15.5 at the rear, that's now settled to 11.5. Let me have a 11.5 centimeters. That is a massive drop, but as you can see, still failing the MCM shoe test on the rear. So what I need to do there is to install some lowering springs on the coilovers. The front, as you can see, sitting really nicely. Can get my hand in there, but it's usable. I live in an area where there are a lot of speed bumps, so I need this car to be a bit higher than a lot of you guys are wanting. But for now, coilovers done. Today is a very special day because in exactly 4 days' time, I will be driving to the Nürburgring with Phil. So before I go to the ring, I need a little bit of safety gear, which is what I'm hiding very, very expertly behind me. So the first thing to go on is this rollover bar.